cultivate, to take time on. We allow other distractions, other things to kind of step in the way and put our focus, our power, our energy into those things. And so whenever there's a group of people that come together with that intent of focusing, if only for a small amount of time, on learning, studying, retrieving, and becoming enlightened, then it says a lot about who you are and the journey that your spirit and your energy has taken in this, not just in this lifetime, but in all lifetimes, indeed. So, first and foremost, all of you, most of you, 95% of you are instructors here, teachers, or soon to be in the Kemetic Yoga art. And so we felt that it was very important that we make the connection of the source of this information so that you can be more effective, more consistent, more authentic in how you present what it is that you say that you're representing in the world. So for that, this is a very important presentation. It's the beginning of a ongoing relationship that started when I first interacted with the Sima Institute and with the teachings thereof, and that continues through the work that's being done now. So I invite you to just enjoy today's presentation. We only ask one thing, that all questions, comments, etc. be left until the end of, so if you have your notepads, write them down, because we want to get through this. It's a pretty lengthy presentation. It's a lot of information, and we know that you guys are, the people who were selected to be here tonight were considered to be of a different mindset than the average, so that we could really deal with the topic at hand in a very thorough, comprehensive way without getting sidetracked and so on. So again, if you have any questions, comments, whatever, just until the end of the presentation, make sure that your cell phones are off or on vibrate. Make sure you're tuned in and ready. And with that, we're going to welcome probably the most, certainly the most scholars on the subject of yoga, mysticism, and its history and its African origins. Welcome with us, Dr. Muata Ashby.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who were here last time, and those of you who perhaps were. It seems that we have the same amount of people as last time. It's supposed to be a select, smaller group that was really wants to hone in on some important teachings. Those of you who were here last time remember that we had a larger group, people from the general public who were coming out to attend, and many issues came up that we dealt with that we didn't really get to go through the presentation as it was planned. So the net that the gods and goddesses had a different plan for that day. So we're not going to take questions until the end, but why don't you, I want to ask a couple of questions and then you can raise your hand and say, yes, or however you want to reply. So I'll get an idea of where you are, and maybe I can adjust the presentation as we go along to hit certain subjects that may be of specific need or interest. Firstly, how many of you have read any of the books that I've written? Have you read Egyptian Yoga, Volume 1?
The whole book.
Have you read African Origins? Have you read any of the African religion series? Anunian theology, Tibetan theology, Kemet theology? Serpent power? Meditation? Okay. what I wanted to do, what I had planned to do last time, was to give a introductory presentation going into my work, to give you an idea of what the studies have been, what the researches have been, what the practices have been, what people such as yourselves around the country who have done presentations to have received, and perhaps a little bit of an idea of what other people have been doing around the country, other groups who have been following this teaching, so you can get an idea for yourselves of what you may like to do. And this first set of slides I'm going to run through more or less quickly because we did it last time. It was only we only got to the first 8 slides last time out of a presentation that had about 40 or 50 slides, but I've compressed it down so we can get through more efficiently. As you know, just so we can be on the same page, ancient Egypt came before all other civilizations that there is history of in this human timeline that we have now. There have been other timelines, other histories, other eons. We are told in Anunian theology that the eons roll around in a cycle. You have a cycle of creation, a cycle of growth and expansion, a cycle of degeneration, a cycle of death, a cycle of rebirth again, and this occurs over billions of years. In this particular cycle of human existence, ancient Egypt was the first advanced civilization to emerge. Before the Indians, before the Greeks, before the Mesopotamians, before the Aryans, before any other civilization that you can think of. And how can we say that? We have evidences to back that up. In studying cultural anthropology, there are many societies that claim to have ancient societies or ancient origins, 50,000 years and 50 million years or whatever. And usually it is an oral tradition or a scriptural tradition where these kinds of evidences are presented. And those of you who have studied African culture, African studies, know that oral tradition is very big in the African tradition. And there's nothing wrong with the oral tradition except that it is easily disturbed, easily distorted, easily damaged. If you were to lose the griot of a village, your society's lineage, your society's history and culture is in danger, because all you would have is really the pieces that other people who are not experts and who have not studied that, they can come together and try to piece things together, and then you're going to have something else other than what the griot was carrying forth from his or her previous teacher who taught them before, and the one who taught them before, and so on and so forth. And in many ways, in colonial Africa, that is what has happened. The disturbance due to racism, now recently, but also previously colonialism and slavery, has damaged the oral tradition of Africa, at least in the last 500 years. And previous to the European colonial era, there was an Arab colonial era that most people are not aware of. And that also did damage to the history and the culture of African tradition. But we are fortunate to have a written tradition also, which is less susceptible to disturbance, less susceptible to damage, less susceptible to distortion. And that is the kemet tradition. The kemet tradition is based on the culture and life of Africans who lived in Northeast Africa before the Arabs, before the Europeans, before the Mesopotamians. And they kept a record of their existence and their civilization for many thousands of years. And that is what we call the Meta-Nectar, the hieroglyphic texts that are inscribed in the temples, that are inscribed in the papyri, and in other sources. From that, from cultural anthropology studies, and you can follow how this can and was done through the book African Origins. And the theory behind the cultural anthropology, in a book that I wrote called Comparative Mythology. You'll find that, I'm going to go through some of the books that I've written. You'll find that I've written books on many subjects that may not appear to be related, but they actually expound on aspects of scholarship that are necessary in order to understand Kemetic studies. And one of them is comparative mythology. How do you compare cultures? Because it is necessary for us to do that so that we can fully piece back together the tradition and culture and history. And one way to do that is to compare what the Kemetic history presents, comparing it to the Indian history, comparing it to the Greek, comparing it in many, and this is how language studies have been done also to reproduce or to redevelop, recapture the ancient Egyptian language as well. Because other cultures, some of the words, like for instance, some of the words of German have come into English, some of the words of French have come into English the same way. Some of the ancient Egyptian words went into ancient Greek, into the Mesopotamian, into other places. So by studying that, we can reconstruct the language. In the same way we can reconstruct mythology, whatever pieces are missing. We can reconstruct religious studies, political histories, and things like that. And we're going to see a little of that today. So what we're talking about is the land that is in the northeastern corner of the continent of Africa, today known as Egypt. Ancient name is Kemet. The ancient Kemetans tell us that they originated as a colony of people who came from the south, from the land that is today called Sudan, which is in ancient times called Kush, as well as by the Greeks was called Ethiopia. Again, the ancient Ethiopia of the Greeks is not the same Ethiopia of today. The country of Ethiopia today is farther to the south and to the east. Okay? Now let's go into a brief introduction so we can move along. As we said last time, just this timeline is presented so you can get a breadth of how vast the ancient Egyptian history is. On the far left, you can see that Sheta Neter, or the ancient Egyptian history, the ancient Egyptian religion, existed. We have evidence as early as 10,000 BC. So at 10,000 BC, we have evidence of an ancient civilization with an ancient culture, with a developed legal system, a developed religious system, a developed philosophy. And there is no place else in the world where that exists. Not until about 7,000 years later. We have the Hindu society and the Mesopotamians coming up. So for the 7,000 years, the ancient Egyptians are the only game in town. And the Native Americans come much, much later also. Those of you who may be asking, so some of you may have asked last time, there is no such thing as Atlantis, there is no such thing as Lemuria. These are mythic teachings that have nothing to do with history or reality. Okay? Unlike ancient Egypt, that we can go and we can actually find the temples, we can actually find the cities, actually find places that are described, and we can find the monuments that still exist. There is no land called Atlantis, no Lemuria, no temples, no nothing, except the story that was given by Solon to Plato, who was recounting a story that he was told by the ancient Egyptian priests of the city of Anu, where he was a student. Solon was a Greek man who went to Egypt to study philosophy. And the ancient Egyptian priest asked him if he knew about his own history. He said, "What history are you talking about?" Because this is a classical Greek period. The classical Greeks had forgotten about their ancient history. He told him about a land called Atlantis, what he called Atlantis. And what our studies have postulated, and we agree with Cheikh Anta Diop, is that there was an island, a Greek island, like the island of Minos, where the Minoan civilization had developed. And this island blew up. And that is what we believe that they are referring to as the Atlantean city, the Atlantean civilization. But this civilization comes along in the period that we would call the late period of ancient Egyptian history, which is about 1500 to 2000 BC. And as we just said, ancient Egypt was in existence 8,000 years before that. So even if there was an advanced civilization of the Greeks, it comes much later in history. And it's very likely that, like Minoan society, I'm talking about many things, but if you go to African origins, it's all there. The Minoan civilization was actually related to ancient Egypt. And you'll find that the early Greeks say that they got their language and they got not the certain language, but the script. They got the gods and goddesses from the Egyptians. This is what Herodotus tells us. This is what Plutarch tells us. So ancient Egypt is the source. Just like it's the source for Christianity, it's the source for Hinduism, source for Buddhism, source for Yoruba, as I've shown. Look at African origins, and you'll find all this there. Moving along. We talked about one of the evidences of the existence of ancient Egypt at 10,000 BC, and that is the evidence is contained in the archaeological study of the Great Sphinx. We talked about the water damage on the Sphinx enclosure, which could only have occurred through rainfall. The earliest or the latest time that sufficient rainfall was known to occur in northeast Africa, which is now a desert. The latest period where that is known to have occurred was 7,000 BC. 7,000 BC to 10,000 BC. So that was the last period where there was sufficient rain in order to make this kind of damage in the stone enclosure of the Sphinx. Problem? Mm-hmm. So it had to be in existence prior to that period. Now, the Hollywood version of ancient Egypt is imagination, and perhaps it can be considered a sham, if not an outright malicious distortion. There is no such thing as mummy curses. There is no such thing as the idea that the ancient Egyptians were European looking. What happened was that the Greek Empire, through Alexander, conquered Egypt, and then Alexander installed one of his generals to be the new pharaoh, the new king. And so the royalty at that time, from about 300 BC onwards, you have rulers who were Greeks for a short period of time. And then came the Romans, and so on and so forth. But the people remaining African looking. We have shown that before. Those of you who saw this picture last time, don't answer the question. Just laugh when everybody else tries to answer the question. Can anyone that was not here last time tell me who the ancient Egyptians are in this picture? If there are any. All of them? Anyone else?
The dark skin.
The dark-skinned ones? Anyone?
The small ones.
The small ones? Anyone else? Who?
The cow.
The cow. No, that's malicious now. Come on. Okay, we have the small ones, we have the dark ones, we have, what else? Someone else?
All of them.
All of them? Okay, basically, I don't have my pointer, maybe I do actually here. We can tell the difference of who the ancient Egyptians are by their headdress and their clothing. These 5 men in the front are ancient Egyptians. You see the brown skin with the darker black skin. These gentlemen here with a different headdress and hairstyle and clothing, these are Nubians. Okay, can anyone tell me the difference between their skin coloration and the skin coloration of the ancient Egyptians? That's the point. These are Nubians. Remember we said that they came from Sudan, the land today called Sudan, the Kush, the ancient Ethiopia. This gentleman here, this picture was taken about 15 years ago. This gentleman is a Nubian, a person who lives in the southern part of Egypt, between the border between Egypt and Sudan. My point here is that this is what this was. Okay? And not the Hollywood version, or the Greek version. This is the largest picture, so you can see a little better. This particular slide is a picture from the tomb of a ancient Egyptian governor called Hui, H-U-Y. And these princes were bringing tributes to him, bringing offerings to him. He would be over here. This is gold, for instance. You know, incense and different kinds of and a cow, of course. You can find these pictures in color in the book, The Black Ancient Egyptians. Now, who was the founder of Natarianism? First of all, what is Natarianism? Anyone remember what Natarianism is from last time? No? Natarianism is a modern-day word that we have coined to name the religious practice, the religion of the ancient Egyptians. It's like you have Christianity, you have Hinduism, you have Buddhism, you have Ism. This particular ism is related to the concept of netter. Netter is this. Netter is the divinity, the supreme being, what the Native Americans call the Great Spirit, what the Indians call Brahma, God the Father, Allah, and the practice of the study and attunement to Netter is called Shetat Netter. Shetat means hidden, and Netter means the divine. So the hidden divine, the Egyptian mystery. That's what the concept of the term Egyptian mystery comes from. And we are told by the scripture of Anunian theology that this divinity here, this personality here, called Kepri, he is a netter, he is the divine, in the form of a creator. He brought creation into being. And his main symbol is a scarab. And how this happened was that he was lying down on an ocean, on a primeval ocean, which is called Noon. And Noon means undifferentiated waters, waters without form, or energy without form. In fact, it means consciousness without form. It's like the consciousness that you have when you fall asleep but you're not dreaming. Like when there's nothing really specifically happening, nothing formed, nothing. And when you have a dream, what happens is that you're differentiating, you're making some piece of that matter in your mind into a form that you can recognize and see. In the same way, there was just this ocean, this vast ocean, and Kepri was lying in it, and from his feet emerged three separate pieces of himself, which are called out or flesh, three pieces of flesh. And those 3 pieces of flesh touched the 5 heads of this gigantic serpent. The serpent's name is Asha. And Asha means many, and Ra means face. Head or Hera, which means personality also. So 5 personalities. And we are told that, therefore, that from the 1, we come to the 3, from the 3 we come to the 5, from the 5 we have the multiplicity of all that exists. So all of the matter that exists in creation, you may call it metal, you may call it wood, you may call it water, you may call it earth, fire, whatever it is that you can think of, it all comes back to the one. It all emerges from the one. And this is how many thousands of years ago that this teaching came out? And now, beginning in the years with the 20th century, specifically with the work of Albert Einstein, somehow now we have quantum physics. And what does quantum physics say? That all the matter that exists is actually one thing, which is energy, which is so we needed quantum physics to verify what was known thousands of years ago in Africa, right? Here is Kepri in his boat. Being elevated by the Noon. Noon, this personality at the bottom, is the divinity of the waters. He's actually bringing forth Noon, or helping Kepri to emerge from the waters. So from this undifferentiated waters, now we're having differentiation. We're having something that's being coagulated. Like as if we had water, and all of a sudden we had a little piece of ice that's different from the rest of the water. And that the first thing is the Kepri. And that's what brought forth all of the planets that has emerged from that primeval essence. And you guess that at the end of time, all this creation is going to go back to its undifferentiated form. And then it's going to emerge again in a new creation. So if you're feeling sad or disappointed that humanity is going down the tubes, well, we'll have another chance again. In a few million years. And for those of you who say, to hell with it, I don't want to have this again, what do you have to do? You have to clear yourself of this creation. You have to be free of this creation, so you don't get caught up in the matrix of the cycle of birth and death, the cycle of growing up, the cycle of being a man, the cycle of being a woman, and the cycle of having disappointment, cycle of suffering, cycle of sickness, cycle of death, and rebirth, so you can do it again. And this teaching is what we are going to be discussing a little bit about, but not too much detail, so that'll be for the future time. Essentially for now, what this creation has brought forth is called a Paut Neteru. Paut means a company of gods and goddesses. And you saw the company on the boat. The Neteru brought forth the creation along with 9 divinities. And together, those 9 divinities plus the 1 create 10. And in the Nubian theology, we are told that these 10 divinities act as a form of tree that bridge the heavens with the earth. Each of these divinities represents a principle, a subtle as well as a gross principle of creation. The 5 upper divinities represent subtle principles of creation, including the elements. And the lower 5 are divinities that go to compose the human personality, including the physical body, the mind, the ego, the soul, and all the aspects of the human body, the human personality. Now, that picture that you just saw here, this last picture that you just saw, see if we can get it again. Oh, no, wait again. These divinities that came on with the boat, these 10 divinities, who represent the 10 main divinities of creation. Trying to get that picture so you can see it. Okay, here. These 10 divinities, and on the top, you have what appears to be 3, but they're really 3 in 1. This is really a trinity of 1. Trinity of the Khepri, the creator, Ra Harakti, the sustainer, and Ratem, the dissolver. You have the morning sun, you have the noon sun, and you have the evening sun. And just like in the creation, the beginning of time, you have the creator, you have Ra, the sustainer, and in the end, there'll be a Ratem who will dissolve the world back into its constituent parts. So all the things that you believe in, all the things that you love, or that you hate, or that you think are so important that you keep them in a museum so they don't get ever despoiled, all that is going to dissolve back into its constituent parts. That in itself should give you pause into wondering why you care so much about the things that you care about, that you think are so important. Not that you shouldn't care about things, but it should be in a context. And if you put it in a context, you'll be able to care for them properly in the world, as well as you'll be able to also be free of the world in order to pursue a spiritual goal, a higher spiritual goal as well. That is the idea. Now, that picture that you just saw was the middle of this poster here. These 10 divinities also are related to other divinities. And these form the four main theologies or theurgies of ancient Egyptian religion. A theurgy is a religious science. And the main ones that most people are aware of are Anulian theology, Asarian theology, Memphite theology, and Theban theology. And there is a book written about each one of these theologies. Up with all of that, there's a whole separate goddess tradition. And Aset or Isis is one of the main divinities that I'm sure you've all heard of. But Isis has a progenitor or prototype divinity called Neith or Net or Anet. And Anet was also the prototype for the Greek goddess Athena. But all the Greeks have the prototype in ancient Egypt anyway, so it's not just that. But that's a different subject. So Khepri brought creation into being, and then he decided to explain what he did to Lord Jehuti. And Lord Jehuti is the god of writing, the god of scripture, the god of hieroglyphs, the god of meditation. And he taught that teaching to goddess Heru and Asar and Set. Asar and Set taught it to their son Heru. Heru taught it to the priests and priestesses. And from that period, from the time of Asar, who was this one, and Aset, all those who rule Egypt are called Heru. And Heru also is the number 10 divinity on the tree of life. And being Heru means that you're a master of the earth. If you are Heru at the same time as you are Ra, that means that you're a master of that which is below and that which is above. So from that time, we have the priests and priestesses being bearers of the lineage that brought it down through history. And here are the hieroglyphic texts of the term Shetal Neter. This is Shetout, and this is a symbol for Neter. Neter, as we said before, means divinity. And being a Shemsu Neter means being a follower of Neter. So if you are a student of this philosophy, this teaching, and you decide that you want to become an Netarian, and you want to, so when someone asks you, what religion do you follow? Are you a Buddhist? Are you a Hindu? You would say, no, I'm a Netarian. Just like others would say, I'm a Yoruba, I'm Christian, or I'm Buddhist, or I'm a Muslim, whatever, you would say you're a Netarian. You're a follower of Neter. Being a follower means to act, to think, to look like, to move, and finally be. So, if one was able to practice that discipline that leads to acting, thinking, looking, feeling, moving, and finally being like the Neter, then one is called Nehas, or resurrected. And this is a depiction from the papyrus of Ani of someone who has attained that. This teaching is contained in pretty much all the books, but specifically in the Egyptian Mysteries series. There are 3 books in that series: Egyptian Mysteries 1, 2, and 3. Now, before we go further, I've discussed a little bit about this already, so we'll go along with it, but just so you can know the books where this information is contained. This book here is a hardcover book. I don't think we have any today. We brought one last time, but I think somebody bought it. It's called African Origins. It's one of our major books. It's got like about 700 pages. And it is divided in 3 parts. It can be purchased either as a soft cover in 3 parts, which is volume 1, which is this one, volume 2, or volume 3. So we have the African origins of African civilization, African origins of Western civilization, and essentially Egypt and India, the African origins of Indian civilization. That's what this book's about. This one, African Dionysus, it used to have an old title called From Egypt to Greece. This book deals with the African origins of Greek culture, philosophy, and religion. This African origins also deals with the African origins of African and relationship with other African religions. And this one deals with with Islam, it deals with Christianity, and the mystical journey from Jesus to Christ specifically deals with the Christian philosophy before the Christian church, which originates in the Assyrian theology. And if we were to put it out as a diagram, this is how it might look. The Shaitan Meter informs the Dogon religion, the Yoruba, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So now, introduction to Egyptian yoga. We've gone through Khepri and the creation. We've discussed a little bit about what Shaitan Meter is, Netarianism. And now let us discuss a little bit about Egyptian yoga, or Sima Tawi, or Smai Tawi. Smai Tawi is a discipline that will help to make the Shaitan Meter effective. You have Shaitan Meter, you may go to the temple, you may study the philosophy, the history, and so on and so forth. But what can you do to help that teaching that we talked about, that becoming the hats, that becoming an awakened being, a master of the above and below? This teaching now, the Semaitawi, is the one that is the nuts and bolts that makes the Shaitan Meter work. Shetat, as I said before, it means what is hidden, and Netter means the divine. And now Simai Tawi, this is the symbol of Sima, and this is the Tawi. Sima means union, and this is the same symbol here, that these divinities, these Neteru means divinities that come from the Netter. Neteru means that it's the same thing as Orishas in the Yoruba. You have supreme being and you have the lesser beings. This divinity here is Heru again, the one number 10. And this divinity here is, I believe it's number 9, or number 8, sorry. This is Set, on the tree of life. Set represents egoism, and Heru represents spiritual aspiration. This is a battle that human beings are waging all the time. And what you're trying to do is to make these two aspects of yourself tie the knot of union. The union, therefore, of the lower and the higher self. In the definition of Indian yoga, the term yoga is also referred to as the union of the higher and lower self. But the term yoga, which has become part of the English lexicon, is translated into Egypt as the Sima. And the Tawi means the upper and the lower land. The divinities of the upper and lower land are guess who? Anybody? Except you.
You're saying the divinities of the upper and lower land is the question?
Yeah. Who do
Upper
you think
Egypt,
is up?
Lower Egypt.
Yeah.
Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt.
Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Anybody?
Upper Egypt is set.
Upper Egypt is set. And what's the divinity of the Lower Egypt? Everyone's set. Exactly. That's what we had them on. So it was a gimme. That's what we had them on the slide.
What about the
No questions. No questions.
plants?
Just very quickly, yes, the lotus and the papyrus are also the plants of the upper and lower Egypt as well. So these are the divinities of two lands, and then we find out that this image comes from one of the scriptures. We find out that these two divinities are not separate individuals, but they are aspects of ourselves, and we are given to understand that the divinities in the tree of life are really representing aspects of ourselves, that if we were to master them, we would become masters of those principles. And therefore, we become masters of our personalities as well as the universe. Remember, we said those divinities of the universe as well as our personalities. These books deal with specifically the teachings of the Simai Kali. This is a kind of Egyptian yoga series, if you will. Volume 1, which is the main book that we wrote at the beginning. Volume 2. And this is the one which many of you may be familiar with. The Egyptian yoga postures, the Jet Neberu, and initiation into Egyptian yoga. This one gives you the nuts and bolts of how to start. Like, what do you do, tomorrow morning to get started practicing the turn is the shutdown better. Now, this Simatawi, these disciplines of Egyptian yoga, there are four main ones. There are others, but there are four main ones. And these disciplines are designed to affect the four main aspects of the human personality. And one of them is the intellect. One of them is feeling. One of them is will, and one of them is action. There are 4 books that deal with each one. For the discipline of intellect and intuition, Mysteries of Isis, the path, and these are all can be seen as separate paths. Although you balance them out, you may have one main one that you follow to develop and purify yourself so that you can master the Shetal better. So the Simai Kawi that deals with the aspect of developing your intellect and developing your intuitional awareness, that is the Simai Kawi of a set. For the action aspect of a human being, for the things that you do with your 2 legs, your arms, with your speech, that is Ma philosophy. The goddess Ma presides over that. And for your feeling, in order to develop properly You must purify your feeling. You cannot have feelings of hatred or feelings of lust or feelings of love that are not under your control. In order to do that, you must practice devotional love, the path of devotional love. It purifies feeling and allows you to develop attachment and affection for the divine. The aspect of will, the aspect within you that allows you to take action, to have stamina, to have how shall we say, a capacity to endure. That will is affected through or developed through meditation. For example, if you would say, let's say you're a little overweight, and you say, I'd like to stop myself from eating ice cream all the time, but you don't have the will to stop doing that. And that will is not different from if you come to this program today and we tell you that meditation is a necessary practice for you to develop yourself and to become a master and so on and so forth. But, okay, then you say, okay, yes, I'm going to meditate. Then you go home and then you sit down in a posture and your mind starts racing. And you start having an itch, and you start scratching and moving. Or then your leg starts hurting, and then you say, oh, let me get up here, I can't take this, I can't do this. That lack of will to be able to do that is not different from anything else that you might not be able to do. The secret or the key to it is to relentlessly make an effort to develop your will through practice of meditation, whether it seems to be a failure or not. And what that means is that, let's say that you sit for 5 minutes and your mind is racing. You think there's nothing really happening, but actually it is happening. Very slowly, you are accumulating mental impressions of sitting. Eventually, those mental impressions of sitting are going to overcome the impressions of mental agitation, mind racing, of unruly emotions. If you were to sit, regardless of if your mind is racing or not, if you were able to exert your will and say, I'm staying here for the full 5 minutes, or whatever it is, eventually because any kind of action that you're doing is called Ari. That is in Mayan philosophy now. Ari is action. Anytime you have an action, after the action is finished, you're leaving a residue in your unconscious mind, like an imprint of that action. The feeling, that imprint has a memory component, it has a feeling component, and the feeling component is the stronger. Is why you can remember feelings longer than you can remember specific situations. You may remember, you feel bad, or when you think about a person that you used to know, but you don't know why you feel bad, or why you liked someone, or why you love something. You remember specifically why. If you were able to do regression or hypnosis, you'd be able to find out the specific situation, so on and so forth. This residue, this Ari, or Ariyu, is what carries forth, or what constitutes a person's content of their unconscious mind. Unconscious mind is a content of your past feelings and thoughts, desires. And that's what the Indians call karma, we call it Ari, or Ari. It is the same content that is judged in the in the judgment of Ma'at, of the balanced scales of Ma'at, your heart with its content is judged against the feather of Ma'at, where your actions and feelings and thoughts so worthy and so righteous that they are light and that they do not encumber you, they do not burden you, they leave you free, or are they heavy and they are burdening you and they're making you suffer, making you feel bad, or making you feel angry, or making you feel hateful, or making you feel loving. You say, life is good. If I can just stay here and I can have all the men and women that I want, I can have more children, I can have more money, life is good. People will like to say life is good because things are going well for them. If things weren't going so well, they'd be singing a different tune. A philosopher, which is what you're supposed to be training to become, would think, this person here who hates and the person who loves, both of them are creating Ari that is going to drag them down and hold them back and not be able to discover higher consciousness. So let me reject both of those as a philosopher. Let me set those aside. The love as well as the hate, so that I can be free to discover the higher reality behind this relative reality of the world of time and space that is going to blow away one day anyway. Fleeting. Remember we said that again? You follow? You see where we're coming from with all of it? Not that the time and space reality does not have a practical effect or practical aspect that needs to be dealt with. We're not saying that, right? You can't walk out here and go in the middle of Broward Boulevard and think a car's not going to hit you because it's composed of primeval ocean. Because it's actually energy. There's a practical aspect of it, right? But yet, from a philosophical perspective, that practical reality is bogus. It wasn't true in the beginning, it wasn't, and it won't be true in the end. And it's only true now to the extent of your adherence to the belief in it. I'll pause there for a minute so that can digest. But that's a high philosophical teaching that we're not going to really go into details right now. I'm trying to give you an idea of the depth of what it is that we're talking about. Now, these are the four main books. Along with these four main books, the important books of the Simaitawi are Initiation to Tradition Yoga and the Kemetic Diet. Those of you who are starting, after reading the Egyptian Yoga Volume 1, you should go to these two books. The Kemetic Diet and an Initiation.
What was the first one?
Egyptian Yoga Volume 1.
And then these two.
And then these two, and then the four behind. And then after that, if you want to get into more detailed studies of a particular tradition that appeals to your Ari, because the Ari is what gives you the tendencies of your personality. The things that you have believed in, the things that you have liked or disliked in the past, your experiences, that creates that sum total of that leads to a personality. And that personality may like more things that are intellectual. It may prefer things that are more active. I don't want to be studying so much philosophy. I want to do things. I want to build temples. I want to do this and with that. Some personalities don't like action and they don't like studying philosophy. They like praying or they like chanting. Other personalities say, I don't like chanting. I don't like studying philosophy so much. I don't like action so much, or doing action or righteousness, or so let me sit and meditate. So even you can have a focus when you discover a path or a discipline that is in line with your personality. But must also remember that regardless of if you have a preference, all of the aspects have to be blended to some degree. You need to have some philosophical understanding. You need to have some devotional feeling, purified feeling, if you're going to meditate. Just for example, this is the tomb of the sage king Seti Uwa, which is Seti the First. And in this tomb, he had inscribed a special teaching of meditation that we refer to, or that we call, or that is called Ra'aku Uwa, or the glorious light. This is the earliest known, that I'm aware of, specific formal teaching of meditation practice in this human history. It comes before Buddhist meditation, comes before meditation practice in Hinduism, or in any other culture or society. I'm not saying this, when I say these things, I'm not saying them to be holier than thou, or to be elevating, that this is the greatest. I'm saying it as a matter of fact, history. And the reason I'm saying that is because in some quarters there may be movement to try to discount these issues, or to say that, oh, it doesn't matter, meditation, and it came from here. In a philosophical sense, it may not matter. From a historical and cultural perspective, or a practical perspective, it has a lot of importance, it has a lot of meaning. As well as from a karmic perspective, from the Ari, from your personality perspective. If you are the type of personality that has more tendency and feeling and desire for African things, or things African, then that's important to you, because this is an African mode of practice. If you're the kind of personality that likes Indian stuff more, then you might like more Buddhist meditation stuff. And that's all fun. And this may be so, or may be true also, because throughout the sum total development of your personality, you have not just been, most of you who are here are African descent, or Hispanic descent, who are here in this room today. But you have not always been Africans. You have lived lifetimes before. You have not always been men or male. Sometimes you have been female. Sometimes you have been Native American. Sometimes you have been European. Sometimes you have been Indians. So there may be some residue of some other aspect of your history that is very appealing too. And so some of you may be in a peculiar position that you may, so that the ancient Egyptian iconography appeals to you big time, and which is a devotional effect and feeling. And you may like a Buddhist chant, and you may like Native American meditation. I'm just giving you an idea of a mishmash of what can occur. Regardless of if that was to happen, you must in order to have success on your practice, you cannot have Sadhvar spirituality. It's not going to work. Not to say that you cannot partake in other systems or other, but you must have a main one. You must have an anchor. And especially at the beginning, if you're in that kind of position, I would say in the beginning, you really have to concentrate on one. And then afterwards, when you reach a certain level, then you can partake, or you can participate with other people in other traditions and so on. But that's a different issue. We're not discussing that right now. This is the basic teaching, the hieroglyphic text of the Glorious Light Meditation. And it's contained in the book. I don't know if we have any books here today of the Glorious Light. I discovered this teaching several years ago. For what it was. Because in formal meditation practice, you can have many teachings that tell you to meditate or tell you to reflect or tell you to concentrate. But in formal meditation practice, there has to be certain parameters, certain specific instructions that are given. Formal meditation practice, you're given a posture. Formal meditation practice, you're given a specific chant or utterance to practice. You're also given a visualization. This is the first time in history that I'm aware of that a formal meditation practice was codified, which means that it existed prior. But this is when it was codified. In about 1350 BC. These are the books I talked to you about earlier. The Kemetic Mysticism series, Egyptian Mysteries, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The Philosophy of Sheda Better in Volume 1. In Volume 2, the concept of the Neteru, or the gods and goddesses. And this is not exhaustive, but it's a very comprehensive list of the gods and goddesses and the meaning and interrelationships. And in Volume 3 is a discussion and expansion on the discipline of priests and priestesses of ancient Egypt. Those of you who aspire to be a priest or priestess, that is your main goal. The discipline of Muat philosophy, one of the main Simatawi disciplines. The goddess who presides over the balanced scales we talked about earlier of your heart. This is an actual temple of Maat, one of the very few that survive. We have the opportunity to visit there. That's contained in the book Introduction to Maat Philosophy. As far as the practice of purification of feeling, it is incorrect for you to when you think about someone who is emotionally exuberant and who is yelling, who is emotional, who is upset, or who is not upset, or they're happy, hysterical, happy. A person who wins the lottery and starts jumping up and down, they can't stop laughing, that's hysteria. It's not a problem with emotions, it's a problem with feeling. Your emotions come from your feelings. If you were to purify your feelings, you would not have emotional problems. And in order to do that, you must practice devotional love. Devotional love is practiced through devotional worship, through chant, through ritual. And it is instructed that you should have an altar in your home. It could be a special room, or it could be a corner of your room, where you daily turn to the divine, to utter certain special chants, and to make certain special offerings to attune you to your higher divine self. And this is a picture of an ancient Egyptian man with an altar in his home. There are three main worship times, and this is something, a tradition that was carried on in Judaism. With each divinity that we talked about before, the creator, the sustainer, the dissolver, you are to have a threefold daily worship. One in the morning, at noontime, and in the evening. And these books here discuss the path of devotional love, the mystic path of divine love, or the God of love, and devotional worship manual. Now, as far as the practice of the Egyptian yoga postures, what we call Neteru, or the movement of the gods and goddesses, is a very extensively researched and developed system of practice that Asar Ang became a certified practitioner of, and he may have led and taught some of you. How many of you have attended his classes? Good. Now, I don't know how much the philosophy behind it he has discussed with you, but we're going to go over a brief look. Basically, the posture series is divided into phases or stages. And the discipline is dedicated to give you a physical workout. It's also dedicated to giving you a mythological connection, which means that you're actually practicing postures that the ancient Egyptian Neteru, gods and goddesses, have come into. If you were to take that mythic, so when you're doing the postures, you say, oh, this is the Set posture, this is the Heru posture, and you have a kind of a mythic attunement that it reminds you of the myth that you learned, the teaching about, or the episode of how Heru had a battle with Set, things like that. What if you were to take that practice to another level, and you were to meditate on the source of each posture? If you were to not necessarily take a session and do each posture in the series, but just say take 2 or 3 and meditate and think about each one for say like 5-10 minutes each, or a half hour. You would find that you could have a mythic identification with that particular divinity, and that divinity could be a doorway to help you discover the source of that divinity, which is the Neteru, the Neteru. So each Neteru is a source for the Supreme. And that is the meditative practice. So here are the phases of creation, the earth phase, the transition, the higher self phase, and the enlightenment phase. About 27 postures in all for the main practice. And the book, Egyptian Yoga, Postures of the Gods and Goddesses. It is the old title, Movement of the Gods and Goddesses. This is a poster that we have produced. Some of you who had purchased this last time. A picture of the postures in the series. And I believe this is a picture of me doing the postures. Now, about the origins of yoga. How are we doing on time? We're okay on time? All right. Battery power, we're okay and everything? Okay. Now, since I know has concentrated possibly a little more and for a longer period of time and extensively on the practice of the postures. And since I think when I asked the question at the beginning about who has read African Origins, all of you said no, right? I'm going to present to you a section of the book African Origins. This is just a summary of the section. The book is much more extensive. Give you an idea of the difference between, or the origins of the Indian postures, and how to differentiate between the modern practice of the Indian postures, the ancient practice of Indian postures, and the practice of the Egyptian yoga postures. Follow that? First of all, this is part 3 of the African Origins series, the Egypt and India, where you'll find this teaching that we're discussing right now. What is yoga? When we think of yoga, we usually think of this. We think of a man or woman in a pretzel position, in a lotus posture, and you don't think about philosophy so much. You think about more like physical postures and fasting or special breathing exercises. Or you think of Indian sages in the mountains somewhere. You don't think of yogis as people in ancient Egypt in the temples of Egypt, do you? Or at least not prior to this lecture. Or if you're into modern culture, you may be have seen some of these images around. I've tried to collect a few of these images when I see them when I travel, of how the concepts of yoga have permeated the culture in a negative way, and how they're used to sell products, or they're used to denigrate those who are proponents of meditative practice and yoga practice and vegetarianism and so on. So if you don't want to be a dog like this, then don't do what he's doing. Don't practice this teaching. Or you may be a disco yogi. Someone who wants to practice yoga as well as be in the culture. That's like trying to be healthy and going to McDonald's at the same time. Or you may like to party. You may like to imbibe. It's important to understand that modern liquor originated only a few centuries ago. Human existence has progressed without the existence of modern liquor for thousands of years. It is true that various societies have created substances to promote a spiritual state, or promote a altered state, or a conducive state of consciousness or mind, so that a ritual can be perfected. That is true. And the Native Americans may have peyote, the Indians had soma, and we had, the ancient Egyptians had a drink called sjirt, a combination of mandrake and beer and other substances. It's not the same as liquor. It's important for you to understand. These other inducements will not be for the purpose of creating a euphoria, a mindless euphoria, or a kind of a violent and dangerous state of mind where you'd be doing things that would endanger yourself, or like drunk driving, or endanger the lives of others and things like that. They would be administered by specialists and overseen by the priests and priestesses who are conducting the ritual. Now, indulgence on the origins of yoga. In reference to the origins of yoga, the authors of the book In Search of the Cradle of Civilization, Björk Furstein, David Frawley, and Subhash Kak assert the following on pages 170 and 171. This is in your African Origins book, if you get it. The Hindus have traditionally looked to the archaic Vedas as the seedbed of the later yoga tradition. The term yoga itself first occurs in the Rig Veda, but does not have its later technical connotation. Now, the word yoga, this is what in Indian proponents of yoga like to say that, wow, yoga is ancient. Yoga has existed for ages and millennia, and from the Vedas, which come from about or maybe a little prior to the New Kingdom era of ancient Egypt, which is about 1500 BC. Now, just one little problem with this claim. As they themselves say, the concept of yoga, the idea of yoga as we know it today, as a discipline for pursuing the union of the higher and the lower self to attain spiritual enlightenment. That was not the same meaning that the scriptures known as the Vedas had in ancient times. The term yoga in the Vedas of the ancient times, the 1500 BC, means to yoke as in yoking a cart with a horse. Not yoking the lower self and the higher. So the meaning of the term was changed about 1,000 years later in Indian culture when the Upanishads came along. In the Upanishads, then we have the concept of yoga in India developing as a concept of union of the higher and lower self for spiritual enlightenment. So that means that the philosophy of yoga, this is the philosophy of yoga now. We're not talking about physical postures yet. You know, these postures that are ancient and that existed for thousands of years, we're not looking at that yet. The philosophy of the physical postures, or backtracking before that, the concept of the yoga of the Upanishads, which comes in about 800 to 500 BC. This is when now we start to see a concept that can be correlated with the ancient Egyptian disciplines that we've just discussed, which were pre-existing. And this is contained in a book of a scholar by the name of Georg Fierstein, who is one of the supposedly foremost in Western indulgence. There are two kinds of indulgence. An indulgence is a person who studies Indian culture and history, just like you have an Egyptologist. But you have Western indulgence and you have Indian indulgence. Just like you have African Egyptologists and you have Western Egyptologists, like myself and perhaps like a Cheikh Diaz. And of course, your culture or your origin is going to inform some of the things that you say or the perspectives that you come into the research with. And we know the Western perspective, what that has been, basically to elevate Western above everything else. And so Indian indologists have striven to overcome that bias, just as Africologists and Egyptologists have striven for the same thing. Now, Georg Fierstein is a Western indologist, and this is what he has to say about, because in the book they asked him, because a lot of people come up with not just Egyptian yoga, you had heard about Jewish yoga, about Native American yoga, many kinds of yogas, if you understand the concept of yoga broadly. Or even under the same definition that we gave. Union, higher, lower self. But there's always this you'll find that there's a bias, and not just by Indians, but by many people in many quarters, Jews or whoever it may be, to have a proprietary control over what they perceive is a certain legacy that belongs to them. So basically he's saying that it is, however, somewhat misleading to speak of Jewish yoga, Christian yoga, or Egyptian yoga, unless the word yoga is employed as a straightforward substitute for mysticism or spirituality. And then what I'm saying is opposite to that. Or I'm not, or I guess maybe not opposite. I'm saying not just that. I'm saying not just that yoga is to be understood as a mystic form of spirituality. Mysticism means union of higher and lower self, essentially. But he's trying to say that in a generic term, that basically you can only call yoga what comes from India. That's basically what he's getting at. And so what I'm saying is that not only that, what I'm saying is that what the Indians are calling yoga, what they're using a term that actually calls yoga, we already have a term in Africa called sima. If you go to Jewish yoga or Christian yoga, there is no term that is equivalent to yoga in those. You can make it because in a generic sense it is. But there's no actual term that you can go to and say, oh, this is Christian yoga, where it's actually being talked about and mentioned and listed, and here are the discipline. And in ancient Egypt we can find them. All of them. So, and just as an aside, maybe a little pride on my side, or maybe a little egoism on my side.
There you go.
That George Fierstein's office, because I was sort of back then 10 years ago associated with the Yoga Journal, which is it's a Yoga Journal. It's a magazine of it's a Western magazine for Westerners about the practice of yoga, basically. He's big time associated with them. He writes for them and they promote his books and things like that. He's very popular in the yoga circles of the United States. So Western yoga, English speaking. Not in India necessarily, but here. So anyway, Jörg Fierstein's office called our office to get a copy of our book, African Origins, where I was saying these things. Because not only was he was saying a lot of stuff that is like off the wall, okay, let me give you a for instance. Basically, he's trying to say that the Saraswati River in India is proof, because they discovered the Saraswati River, which is talked about in the Vedas, that is proof of the existence of a society before the Indus Valley culture. Most of you know about the Indus Valley culture are the dark-skinned African-related peoples of southern India. So he's trying to say that there is archaeological evidence to show that this river existed and it was there, so and so forth, da 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 da. But in African Origins, and other scholars have done this, not just me, showing the evidence of the water damage of the streams. And so in his other book, he says, oh well, that's evidence that can be debated. Who knows what that is. So we have a double standard. We have one archaeological evidence that's accepted to prove someone's point, and other archaeological evidence that is rejected because it doesn't prove our point. I'll leave it there. So you can be the judge of what that means.
But I think you can find some of the debate in African Origins.
But the African Origins,
I think there are quotes directly back and forth between the two.
We didn't communicate directly, but you know how in scholarship, what happens is that when there's a reviewed article or journal, that one scholar writes something, another scholar refutes it or supports it or finds evidence and so on and so forth. And that's what I did. The evidence is that Fierstein was talking about and Frawley, those two gentlemen, and others, and their statements, they were dissected and blown up by myself in the book. And we go point by point to show them the erroneous logic and the erroneous evidences that they're presenting and so on and so forth. And I never received a reply to my serious God. And this is after 8 years.
Wow.
Now, so what is yoga? If you approach those Indian sages who are recognized as being proponents of high mysticism and philosophy. This is the kind of answer that you get. Yoga is a universal religion. It gives insight into every religion. Yoga embraces all religions of the world. It does not see the need for contradicting them. Its interest lies in giving a wider meaning to one's love for God. What is contradicted is limitation in understanding God and mental obstruction in developing love of God. All great mystics, saints, and seers in all parts of the world proclaim the same reality, but in different expressions and different languages. Yogic principles are verified through all great personalities. Many practice universal yoga without giving it a Sanskrit name. The teachings of Jesus were inspired by the yogic teachings that prevailed in antiquity through Buddhism. Socrates was inspired by yogic wisdom. Directly or indirectly, all great personalities drink deep from the universal stream of wisdom, which is yoga. Therefore, Christianity is nothing but yoga. I don't think that he's talking about the orthodox practice of Christianity. He's talking about the mystic aspect of Christianity, which we call Gnosticism, which is also the Coptic, which is related to ancient Egypt. This is. Can you change?